There are moments in a life that cannot be explained, only carried. This is one of them. The fire had been burning low for the better part of an hour. Embers mostly, not flame. The kind of fire a man lets die when he has stopped paying attention to the practical things and started drifting somewhere else entirely. Somewhere older. Somewhere that smelled like pine resin and river mud in the particular mix of dust and sweat that had become, over the years, the scent of his own life. Marcus didn't sleep much anymore. He hadn't, really, since his wife passed. That was 3 years ago now, or close enough to it that the distance no longer brought comfort. He had heard people say that grief gets easier with time. He believed they meant well. He had stopped arguing with them about it somewhere around month 7. He sat on the flat rock he always used as a seat when they camped at this particular bend in the valley. The same rock his father had sat on, decades before. Same view of the ridgeline cutting dark and jagged against the sky. Same stars, more or less. Same wind coming down from the north just before midnight, cool enough to remind you that even in summer, the mountains had their own ideas about temperature. And then there was Copper. Copper stood about 15 feet away, where Marcus had tethered him loosely to a pine with a long lead rope. He was an old horse. 23 years old, which was considerable by most measures, and even more considerable given everything the two of them had ridden through together. He moved slowly now. He breathed audibly at rest, the deep and rhythmic sound that Marcus had come to find calming over the years. The kind of sound that tells you something large and living is nearby, and that it trusts you enough to breathe that openly in your presence. He was a bay. Dark reddish-brown coat gone slightly dull with age. A wide stripe of white down his nose that Marcus had always thought made him look a little aristocratic, a little distinguished, like a professor who didn't bother with vanity but accidentally ended up handsome anyway. His mane had gone coarse and his knees gave him trouble in the cold. But his eyes were still clear. Still brown and deep and somehow full of something that wasn't quite patience and wasn't quite love but was its own quiet thing that didn't need a name. Marcus watched the fire die. Copper breathed. The night moved around them without urgency. This was what they had become. Two aging creatures sharing silence in the dark. Marcus had ridden Copper since the horse was 4 years old and Marcus was 29, back when Marcus still ran cattle and thought he understood what hard work meant. Back when his daughter was small enough to carry on his shoulders and his wife used to laugh at his jokes, real laughing, the kind that caught her off guard and made her cover her mouth like she was embarrassed by her own joy. He didn't try to stop the memories when they came at night. He had learned, slowly and painfully, that trying to stop them only made them louder. Better to let them pass through. Better to sit still, like a man in a river, and let the current move around him. He was somewhere deep in that current when Copper moved. Not shifted. Not adjusted his weight. Moved. The lead rope went taut and then Marcus heard the sound of hooves against earth and he looked up fast, pulled back into the present by pure reflex. Copper's head was up. All the way up, which wasn't something Marcus had seen in some time. The horse's ears were forward and rigid, locked onto something in the dark beyond the dying fire's light. His nostrils were wide. His whole body had gone from the loose, half-sleeping posture of a very old horse to something else entirely. Something that belonged to a younger version of himself. Marcus stood slowly. "Easy," he said. Copper ignored him in a way that was so unlike Copper that Marcus felt the first cold finger of something travel down his spine. Not fear, exactly. Not yet. More like the feeling of a word on the tip of your tongue that won't come, something just beyond recognition. "Copper," Marcus said, louder now. The horse turned his head and looked at him. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Marcus to see the whites of his eyes catching the faint ember glow, and something in that look, something urgent in particular, and then the lead rope snapped. Not broke. Snapped. The knot he had tied, which was a good knot, a knot his father had taught him at 12 years old, simply gave way like it had always been planning to. And Copper ran. Marcus stood there for 1 full second, which is a long time when you're watching something impossible happen. A 23-year-old horse with bad knees and a dull coat and deep breathing was galloping into the darkness at a speed that had no business belonging to him. Hooves hitting the ground clean and hard. No hesitation. No stumbling. Running like he was 4 years old again. Marcus didn't think. He grabbed his jacket from the rock and went after him. The terrain was rough and he knew it well enough to navigate by moonlight, which was just bright enough to matter. He ran along the valley floor, following the sound of hooves, and the sound stayed ahead of him but not so far ahead that he lost it entirely. Like the horse was calibrating. Like the horse was making sure he was followed. That thought arrived in his mind and sat there, uncomfortable and certain. He ran for longer than he expected. His legs started to burn and his lungs were reminding him that he was 56 years old and had smoked for a decade in his 30s, and he was not built for this anymore, none of this, and still he kept going because what else was there to do? Copper was out there. Copper was in the dark. He crested a low rise and had to stop, hands on his knees, breathing hard. The hoofbeats had stopped. He lifted his head and looked around, and after a moment he saw it. The pale stripe on the horse's nose, catching moonlight. Copper had stopped at the edge of something. A narrow cut in the terrain, a path that ran down and away into a shallow draw that Marcus had passed 100 times without going into. He walked toward him slowly, still breathing hard. Copper watched him come. The horse was breathing fast too, sides heaving, but already beginning to settle. Already returning to himself. But he didn't move from where he stood. He stood at the edge of that path like a man who had delivered a message and was waiting to see if it had been received. "What is it?" Marcus said, not really as a question. He stepped up beside the horse and looked down the path. At first he didn't see anything. Just shadow and brush and the faint silver of moonlight catching on pale rock. He stood there and let his eyes adjust and his breathing slow, and then he heard it. Water. Moving water. Close, and soft, and mixed with another sound he couldn't immediately name. A low sound. A sound that wasn't quite human but wasn't quite not. He went down the path. The draw widened as he descended, opening into a narrow flat beside a creek he hadn't known was there. The water was maybe a foot deep, clear and quick over smooth stones. And on the near bank, half in the water and half out, lying with one leg bent at a wrong angle, was a person. A boy. Young. Teenage, maybe. Hard to tell in the dark. He was lying on his side and he was shaking in the way people shake when they are very cold and have been cold for a long time, and he was making that sound Marcus had heard, a low and barely conscious moan that had nothing of intention in it. Just survival, the sound that a body makes when it is still fighting without knowing why. Marcus was beside him in seconds. "Hey," he said, and his voice came out soft, instinctively soft, the way he had once spoken to frightened animals and his daughter when she was small and sick with fever. "Hey. I've got you. I've got you now." The boy didn't open his eyes, but the moaning changed slightly. Shifted. Like some part of him had registered the presence of another human and was deciding what to do with that information. Marcus checked in quickly and carefully. The leg was broken, clearly, probably the lower part of the tibia given the angle. There was a cut on his forehead that had bled considerably and dried. He was wearing clothes that weren't warm enough for a mountain night at any altitude, thin layers, the kind of clothing someone wears when they don't plan to be outside after dark. He had been here a while. Marcus pulled off his jacket and draped it over the boy. He pulled on his phone, already knowing what he would find, and yes, no signal. He hadn't had signal since yesterday afternoon. That was the whole point of being out here, he had thought. That had been the appeal. He sat back on his heels and looked at this boy, and the situation assembled itself around him with the quiet weight of something that had been waiting to happen. He looked up the path toward where Copper stood, just visible at the top, still watching. "All right," Marcus said quietly. "All right." His name was Daniel. Marcus learned that over the next hour, piecing it together from the fragments the boy was able to offer between long silences, most of his energy going to the basic task of staying conscious. He was 16. He had come up the valley trail 2 days ago with a group of friends on a camping trip that had, in the easy, careless way of teenagers, become disorganized and then fractured. They had argued about something Marcus never fully got clear on. Daniel had walked away from camp in the early afternoon, still angry, intending to cool down and come back. He had gone further than he meant to. He had lost the trail. He had come down a slope in the gathering dark that was steeper than it looked, and the ground had given way and he had fallen. That was a day and a half ago. He had had water from the creek. He had not had food. He had called out until his voice gave, and then he had stopped because there was no one to call to, and calling only confirmed that silence. He told this to Marcus in pieces, words followed by silences followed by more words, and Marcus listened to all of it without interrupting, which was the only thing he knew how to do for someone in that state. Just be still and let them speak. Let them feel heard. Let them understand that the person beside them was not going anywhere. "My friends," Daniel said at one point. "We'll get word to them," Marcus said. "They'll know you're safe. They're probably," the boy started, and stopped. Swallowed. "They probably think I just went home." There was something particular in that sentence. Something that went beyond the immediate situation. Marcus had lived long enough to hear the undertones in what people said and what they meant, and there was something in how Daniel said it, "probably think I just went home," that spoke to a loneliness that predated this night, that was older than a one-day argument over camping logistics. He didn't say anything to it. Not yet. Some things needed time to find the air. He built a fire. He had the materials in his pack out of habit, the habit of a man who had spent enough cold nights without one to understand their value. The wood from the draw was damp but manageable, and he worked carefully, and when the flame caught and held, he heard Daniel exhale slowly, and he knew that warmth is not just a physical thing. He went back up the path and retrieved Copper and his pack in his bedroll and brought it all down to the flat. The horse walked carefully down the rocky path, measuring each step with a deliberateness that Marcus recognized as his own particular kind of wisdom. The horse settled near the fire without being asked. His breathing returned to that deep, comfortable sound that Marcus had spent years falling asleep to. He splinted Daniel's leg with what he had, which wasn't much, but it was enough for stability. He gave him water and the emergency food bars from his pack, the dense, tasteless ones he had always resisted eating himself but always brought. He pulled his bedroll over the boy and sat close to the fire and let the night do what it was going to do. For a while neither of them spoke. And if you're still here with us, in this quiet, in this dark, listening to this story unfold, maybe that means something. Maybe you already belong to this little family of listeners who come here for stories like this one. You can leave a like if it's staying with you, or simply stay a little longer. We're in no hurry. The fire popped. Copper shifted slightly. Daniel said, "Is that your horse?" "Yes," Marcus said. "He's old." "He is." A pause. "How old?" 23. The boy processed this. "That's really old for a horse." "It is," Marcus agreed. Another silence. Then, "Is he going to be okay?" Marcus looked at Copper, who stood near the tree line with his eyes half closed, firelight moving on his dark coat. He thought about the way the horse had lifted his head earlier. The way he had run. The way he had stood at the top of that path and waited, as though he had known exactly what he was doing and was simply waiting for Marcus to catch up. "Yeah," Marcus said. "He's going to be fine." "How do you know?" Marcus considered the question seriously, the way the boy seemed to want it considered. "Some things you just know," he said finally. "You spend enough time with something, you start to understand it. The way it breathes. The way it holds itself. You learn what its trouble looks like, and you learn what it looks like when it's okay." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My dad had a dog like that. We had him my whole life. He died last year." "I'm sorry," Marcus said. "My dad didn't really talk about it. He just kind of went quiet for a while." "Sometimes that's what it looks like," Marcus said. The fire settled and rose. "This trip," Daniel said, and stopped. Started again. This trip was supposed to be. We were supposed to all be. I don't know. It was my idea. I thought it would be like when we were kids. But everyone kept being on their phones and arguing about dumb stuff, and I got so." He stopped again. The word he was looking for didn't come. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I just walked away. Yeah. And then I couldn't find the way back." Marcus nodded, though the boy's eyes were on the fire and not on him. "That happens," he said. "More than people say." He wasn't entirely sure whether he was talking about the trail. He didn't think Daniel was, either. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, Daniel fell into a real sleep. Not the half-conscious drifting of before, but genuine sleep, deep and still, the kind of body drops into when it has finally decided it is safe. Marcus tucked the bedroll more carefully around him and sat back and watched the fire. He thought about his daughter, Elena, who was 24 now and lived in the city 2 hours south, and called him every Sunday evening, regular as clockwork, because she knew he was alone out here and she was trying. He loved her for the trying. He knew how much effort it took to keep reaching toward a person who had gone quiet, and he had told her so once, sitting on the porch in the early evening with the light going golden and both of them not quite looking at each other the way you do when something important is being said. She had cried a little. He had put his arm around her. Neither of them had said anything else because they didn't need to. He thought about his wife, Clara. The way she had smelled in the morning, coffee and something warmer underneath it, something that was simply her and had no name. The way she had always known when something was wrong before he said a word, and had never once pushed, had only made herself available, created space with her presence the way you create space in a room by opening a window. He had not known, while she was alive, what a rare thing that was. He had suspected, in the vague way of people who don't want to think too carefully about what they might lose. But he had not known. You spend enough time with something, you start to understand it. He had said that to Daniel an hour ago. He believed it was true. He believed it was one of the few true things he knew with any certainty. He looked at Copper. The horse was asleep now, standing with one rear leg cocked, head drooped low, breath slow and even. In the firelight he looked golden. He looked, for a moment, like the horse he had been 15 years ago, like the horse he had been on the day Marcus first put a saddle on him and felt the particular electricity of two creatures learning each other, trying to figure out who the other one was and whether they could be trusted. 23 years. Marcus had not had many things that long. Not jobs, not friendships, not houses. Clara had been his for 18 years, which had felt like a lifetime while it was happening and felt like nothing at all from this side of it. But Copper had been there. Through the years of building and the years of loss, through the hard winters and the good summers, through the death of cattle and the death of people and the long slow dimming of his wife's light as the illness took her month by month, and he had tried everything he knew how to try. Copper had been standing in the field the morning Clara died, in November, when Marcus walked out of the house because he couldn't breathe inside it anymore. and the horse had walked to the fence and put his nose against Marcus's chest and stood there. Just stood there. Not moving. Not doing anything. Just being a warm and living thing that leaned slightly into the weight of him. He hadn't cried until then. And after that, he had felt something. Not better. Not better for a long time. But something. Like a door had opened a crack and air had come through. Like the world had remembered, briefly, that it was not entirely native loss. He owed Copper something for that. He wasn't sure debts worked that way between a man and an animal, but the feeling was real regardless. He looked at the boy sleeping by the fire and he thought about what the boy had said. I just walked away. And then I couldn't find the way back. He had spent 3 years finding the way back. He wasn't sure he was there yet. He wasn't sure there was a there to find, exactly, or whether the finding was the thing itself, the daily practice of putting one foot in front of the other towards something that might or might not resolve into shape eventually. But he was here. In this valley, on this night, sitting beside a fire with an old horse and a boy he hadn't known existed 6 hours ago. And the boy was warm. And the horse was breathing. And somewhere above him, beyond the dark ridgeline, the sky was beginning its slow, imperceptible shift toward morning. He had been there enough times to recognize it. The precise quality of darkness just before it changes. The way the stars seem to go slightly brighter for a moment. The way the night seems to take one more deep breath. He let himself breathe with it. Morning came the way it always does in the mountains. Quietly and then completely. One moment the world was dark and the next it was gray and then gold was touching the ridgeline and the birds were starting their noise and the air smelled entirely different. The way it always does. Like it had been cleaned overnight. Daniel woke up disoriented and then remembered and went still in the particular way of a person reassembling the reality of a difficult situation. Marcus handed him water and a food bar without being asked and sat back down. You're still here, Daniel said. He sounded slightly surprised. Didn't go anywhere, Marcus said. The boy looked around. At the creek, at the fire's remains, at Copper standing quietly in the early light. He looked like he was seeing it all for the first time, which in a way he was. Night and morning are different countries. How do we get out? He asked. I'm going to ride out to where I have signal and call for help, Marcus said. Shouldn't be more than an hour. You stay here, stay warm, stay put. Daniel looked at Copper. Can he carry you? He can carry me, Marcus said. There was no doubt in it. He saddled the horse gently, taking his time the way he always did, running his hand along Copper's side first, talking quietly, the way he had always done. The horse stood patient and still and turned his head once to look at him with that brown eye, clear and deep, and Marcus touched his nose briefly the way he had done 10,000 times. Good boy, he said quietly. One more time. He mounted carefully, feeling his own joints protest, and Copper shifted to accommodate him with the practiced ease of a creature who knew exactly what it was doing. He walked the horse up the path and out of the draw and onto the valley floor. He turned back once. Daniel was sitting up by the cold fire, wrapped in the bedroll, watching him. He raised one hand. Something in the gesture was very young. Marcus raised his hand in return. He rode. Copper moved steadily beneath him, unhurried, each step placed with the careful authority of an old horse who knows his own terrain. The morning light came gold and horizontal across the valley, cutting long shadows from every stone and tree. The grass was silver with dew. The air was cold and clean and tasted like something worth breathing. Marcus didn't push the horse. He let him find his own pace, which was slower than it used to be, and he sat the saddle easily, with the particular relaxed uprightness of a man who has spent decades on horseback and has nothing left to prove about it. He watched the light change as they rode. He listened to the horse's breathing, which was steady. Normal. The ordinary breathing of a horse carrying a man through a familiar morning. He kept one hand resting on the neck, just ahead of the saddle, where he could feel the warmth of the coat in the slow cable movement of muscle underneath. When the signal came back, 2 bars on his phone, he stopped and called search and rescue and gave them the location as precisely as he could. They asked him the right questions efficiently and told him an hour, maybe 90 minutes. He thanked them and ended the call and sat a moment in the quiet, the horse still beneath him, the valley opening golden and vast in every direction. He called Elena. She answered on the second ring, which was not a Sunday, and her voice had that particular note of contained alarm that children learn when their parents are old enough to worry about. "Dad? Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," he said. He stopped. "I just wanted to call." A pause. He could hear her reading the situation, the way she did, the way her mother had always done, with a quality of attention that was its own form of love. "Are you sure?" she said. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I'm sure. I found a boy out here. Hurt. Help's coming." He paused. It was Copper. He found him. Another pause, longer. "Copper," she said, quietly. "Something in him just knew," Marcus said. He heard her breath. Then she said, "Dad, I've been thinking about coming up there. Next month. If that's okay?" "That's more than okay," Marcus said. He stopped, because his voice was doing something it was going to do and there was no preventing it at the moment. "That would be good," he said. "That would be really good, Elena." "Okay," she said, softly. "Okay, then." He sat on the horse in the golden light and talked to his daughter for 20 minutes about nothing in particular. About her work, about the drive, about what she might want to do when she got there. About the valley in early summer, when the wildflowers came in along the creek and the light went long in the evenings. About the flat rock by the river where her grandfather used to sit and that Marcus had always sat and that she had sat beside him when she was small, dangling her feet and asking questions that he had tried his best to answer. He told her the valley would be waiting. He told her so would he. The rescue team was efficient and kind in the way of people who do hard things often enough to have learned how to be calm about them. They brought a stretcher and a young paramedic named Rosa who had a quick and confident manner and made Daniel laugh twice in 10 minutes, which Marcus thought was a genuine skill. Daniel's leg was confirmed broken in 2 places, which was serious but manageable. The cut on his head was not deep. He was dehydrated and malnourished and cold but fundamentally intact, which Rosa said with the professional satisfaction of someone accounting for a favorable outcome. His parents were called. The conversation was brief from the rescue team's end, but Marcus could hear, faintly, a woman's voice on the phone that broke on the first syllable and then steadied, the sound of someone who has been afraid and is now, not over it, but through it. Before they lifted the stretcher, Daniel looked at Marcus. "I don't know your name," he said. "Marcus," Marcus said. "Marcus." He said it like he was fixing it in place. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Marcus said. "Thank Copper." The boy looked at the horse, standing quietly at the tree line, watching everything with that particular calm of his. "Does he know?" Daniel asked. Does he understand that he?" "I think so," Marcus said. "I don't know how much. But I think so." Daniel nodded slowly. Then he said, "I'm going to call my friends. When I get back. I'm going to actually call them." "Good," Marcus said. "And I'm going to tell my dad about the dog," Daniel said. "About missing him. I'm going to actually say it." Marcus looked at him for a moment. 16 years old. Broken leg. Dried blood on his forehead. a bedroll around his shoulders that was going to need washing, eyes that were tired, and something else. Something that had been to the edge of something and come back. "That's a good thing to do," Marcus said. They carried him up the path and out of the draw, and the sound of their voices faded into the morning, and then they were gone. The valley was quiet again. Just Marcus, in the creek, in the remains of the fire, in the light coming gold through the trees. And Copper. Marcus stood beside the horse for a long time without saying anything. He rested his hand on the horse's neck and felt the warmth there, the pulse faint and steady underneath his palm. Copper turned his head and looked at him with that brown eye, clear and deep, and then turned it away again, as if to say there was nothing more to discuss and also nothing that needed to be said. Marcus thought about 23 years. He thought about how long that was. How many mornings they had spent together, how many trails, how many quiet nights, how many moments he couldn't name because they had been too small to name at the time and had only accumulated slowly into the thing that they now were, which was everything. He thought about what it meant that Copper had run last night. That body, those old knees, that careful breath. All of it overridden by something that couldn't be explained in simple terms. Something that Marcus had no scientific language for and wasn't going to look for one, because some things are better held loosely, without the need to pin them down. The horse had known. Something in him had known there was someone out there in the dark who needed to be found. And he had gone. Despite everything that might have stopped him, despite everything that had been slowing him down for years, he had simply gone. Marcus thought that was the bravest thing he had ever seen. He thought about Clara. About how she had always said that Copper was the best of them. She had meant it as a joke, mostly, the teasing of a woman who had been out-compete for her husband's emotional openness by a horse. But there had been something real in it too, something she had seen clearly that Marcus had only been learning to see. He thought about Elena coming next month. About the flat rock and the wildflowers in the long evening light. About what it might be like to sit by a fire with his daughter for the first time in years and let the quiet mean something again. He thought about a boy sleeping safely in the back of a rescue vehicle, making plans to call his father. He thought about how strange it is, the way things connect. The way a trail leads to a draw, leads to a creek, leads to a fire, leads to a phone call, leads to a month from now, to a conversation that wouldn't have happened otherwise. The invisible lines that run between things. The moments that seem separate and are not. He untethered Copper and mounted slowly and turned the horse toward home camp. "All right," he said softly. Copper walked. Not fast. There was no reason for fast now. The morning was warm and getting warmer, and the valley was full of light and birdsong and the easy sound of wind in the pine boughs above the trail. Marcus sat the saddle loose and easy and let the horse choose his own pace and breathe the air and let his eyes move over the land he knew better than almost anywhere else on earth. He was 56 years old. He was a widower. He was a father and a horseman and a man who had spent too long going quiet and was beginning, slowly, to consider what else was possible. He was also, on this particular morning, in exactly the right place. Copper walked. The valley opened around them, golden and patient and vast. And somewhere in the distance, below the ridge, a hawk lifted from a pine and rode the thermal upward, wings wide, catching the light, and was briefly, perfectly, completely free. Marcus didn't talk about that night much. Not at first. It wasn't the kind of story that lends itself to easy telling. Too many pieces of it asked questions he didn't have answers to. He had learned to be careful with things like that, the way you're careful with glass that isn't broken but shows the first hairline trace of something. He told Elena when she came. They sat on the flat rock by the river, her feet dangling, his boots on the ground, the light going long the way he had promised it would. He told it the way you tell something to someone you trust completely, without trying to shape it or explain it, just following the thread of it from beginning to end and letting her draw her own conclusions. She was quiet for a while after. Then she said, Copper knew. He knew something, Marcus said. He went and got you, she said. Yeah. She was quiet again. Then she said, Mom used to say he was the best of you. She did, Marcus said. She meant it as a compliment, Elena said. To him and to you. You know that, right? He thought about it. He thought about Clara in the way she had known things about him before he knew them himself, and about how that knowledge had not stopped with her, how it lived on in his daughter and in the way he had learned to understand the way a horse breathes, and in the quiet of a valley on a summer morning, and in the particular fullness that fills the chest when you understand, all at once, that even in a life of loss, you have been genuinely, irreversibly loved. Yeah, he said. I know. The river moved past them, clear and cold, over smooth old stones. Copper stood in the meadow below, grazing slowly in the gold light. Elena leaned against her father's shoulder and he put his arm around her and they sat there while the evening came, and neither of them felt the need to fill it with anything other than what it already was. Which was enough. Which was more than enough. Which was, maybe, everything. Some things can't be explained. They can only be carried. And sometimes, in the darkest part of a night you didn't plan for, something old and steady lifts its head and goes toward the thing that needs finding, because that is what it has always known how to do. And you follow. Because you always have. Because that is also what you have always known how to do. If this story stayed with you tonight, even just a little, you can leave a like or share what it made you feel in the comments below. And if you'd like to come back to stories like this one, quiet ones, slow ones, the kind that move at the pace of a valley at dusk, you're welcome to subscribe and stay a while. We'll always have a fire going.